Hi. Due to a few requests of fellow YouTubers, I've been asked to do a short video on my knowledge and try to explain contract law. Unfortunately, the explanation of contract law, like all things, has to start from a beginning somewhere, work its way up to the end result. Unfortunately, this is no different in the basis that contract law, how it came about, how it pertains to you, what's your involvement with it. There's no point in starting from the middle of the ladder, because there will be elements that you can grasp the concept of how it came about, and if you don't have the entirety of how this all works, then I failed in my opportunity, if you like, to try and explain it. So first and foremost, I must say that I am not legal representation, and therefore I cannot provide legal counsel. Secondly, the videos are tutorial, educational purposes only, and anything you may take from these videos in an attempt to apply it to a situation you may be facing, you do so at your own risk. I will not accept any liability or responsibility in the event that you do try to apply this to a situation you're facing. So you do so at your own risk if the outcome is detrimental to yourself. That pretty much sums that up. Okay, some words that I suggest you write down on a notepad or something or other, purely for reference point or for training yourself in remembering key points, if you like, that in something that you may face. If you program yourself or train yourself to remember points, it will help you in responding to people who decide to challenge you for whatever reason. It doesn't really necessarily matter the scenario. If it's a person of presumed authority, it pertains to them as well. Basically, as we all know, the world has become corporatized, and any sort of service is by definition a corporation, and therefore must operate under contract law, regardless of all the other laws that politicians make, acts, statutes, mandates. Ultimately, the crux, the center of all this is absolutely, without doubt, contract law. Now, whilst I can't prove elements of part 1, which is what this video will be, by the time I get to the middle of contract law and the end of contract law, it will become apparent logically and rationally that whilst I can't prove elements of part 1, it does make logical, rational sense. So some words that that I suggest you should write down. One is maritime law. The other is salvage rights. Another one is cargo. And another one is vessel. And I'll explain as I go along why those 4 words bear relevance to the basis of contract law and how it pertains to you. So without any further ado, we'll get started. This is Contract Law 101, Part 1. A few hundred years ago, when cargo was transported between countries on vessels, at this point in time I'll refer to it as boats, just as the layman term, but ultimately it's vessel. And the reason for vessel is that the word not only pertains to boats or seagoing, seafaring vessels, it actually, ironically enough, also pertains to, or can pertain to, human beings. As an example, vessel is a word for a seafaring boat, but also within living things there are blood vessels. As another example, the word birth, not only does it pertain to, or a couple of scenarios pertaining to vessels, boats, it also pertains to a expectant mother. But I'll explain or try and explain in greater detail when it gets to that point. So, a few hundred years ago, when cargo was transported between one country and another country, it was placed on a boat and the boat set sail. Now, the captain of the boat, I'll go back. In order to govern, if you like, the seven seas, or the high seas, doesn't matter what you call it, there needed to be a bunch of laws that basically, as the same as any other government, governed the high seas, the seven seas. So a bunch of people came up with an idea on how they could manufacture, if you like, a bunch of laws that people on the seven seas had to abide by, much the same as the presumption that people in Australia have to abide by government legislation. Now, who these people were, or person was, who created these laws, I don't know. I've never looked into it. And if I had to guess, I would say it was most likely the Law Society, because they're not a new society. They're like every other secret society, but not so secret. It's the Law Society with no authority that took it upon themselves to make laws that the average person in the street must abide by. The thing is, nobody gave them the authority to do so. So this was done quite a few hundred years ago. Excuse me. So there is a bunch of laws on the high seas, and that's called maritime law. Now, predominantly, maritime law pertained to the King or Queen's Navy. Now, whether by chance, by fluke, or by clever design, it also covered merchant shipping. Cargo between one country and another country. And I can assume that the laws in maritime law also tried to prevent or lessen piracy. Good old Jack Sparrow, eh? And so, cargo's put on a ship and transported from one country to another country. Now, the captain of the vessel had to have a manifest, a document of detail of what the cargo was that his vessel was carrying. Now, a little sideways step here, trivial. The word shit was not a word that came about as a means to a soft, offensive word. It actually had a meaning in merchant shipping. The word shit, not only did it pertain to the product, yes, manure, when they used to wrap it up in big Hessian sacks, they'd also stamp on it shit. And the reason being for that was that when they were first transporting shit to other countries, manure, fertilizer, they couldn't understand why the vessels were burning and sinking to the bottom of the ocean floor. And it wasn't until somebody came up with the concept that, well, salt water mixed with dry manure caused the manure, the shit, to start self-combusting. And so, because boats were made of wood and they leaked, the salt water got in, mingled with the shit, and it would catch a light and lo and behold burn the vessel to basically to the point of it sunk on the bottom of the ocean floor. And so they stamped shit on it. Now, what shit legitimately meant was ship hire in transport. Okay, so it one, defined what the product was, and two, it told sailors how to store it on their vessels. They used to just store it on the hull floor. And so once they started stamping shit on the Hessian sack, they would ship it stacked off the floor so the water couldn't get to it, so the vessels stopped catching on fire. Just a little bit of trivial there. So cargo was shipped by vessel from one country to another country, and the captain had to have a manifest document detailing the cargo he was carrying on board. I say he not to be sexist, but more to the point that generally back then it was male captaincy. Now, salvage law or salvage rights is a part, or makes up a part, of maritime law, as in the sense that it's either a subsection or it is an actual part of the structure for maritime law. Now, what salvage rights mean is this: if you see a vessel, boat, I'll give a better example. If you're, say, in a dinghy powering around on a lake, a body of water, Sydney Harbour, Brisbane River, doesn't matter as long as it's a body of water. If you see another vessel, boat, what they call in or under maritime law as adrift, which means that there's no crew on board, there's no captain on board, and therefore it's been abandoned. Right? You go and do, say, hypothetically, the right thing, decent thing, and you capture that vessel. Right? You're within your rights to capture the vessel because you're attempting to prevent that vessel from causing damage either to other vessels, piers, docks, wharves, or to itself. So you capture the vessel. Now, once you've captured that vessel, you are also responsible for it. I.e., if you tie it up somewhere and it breaks the rope line and smashes into somebody else's boat, you are liable for that, even though the vessel is not yours. So you've captured this vessel, and now you've got to wait a time period for somebody to actually come and make a claim on that vessel you captured. Now, if after a certain given time nobody has staked a claim on the vessel you have captured, you are within your rights under salvage rights of maritime law to take ownership of that vessel. Okay, so hopefully I didn't mind boggle you too much with that. My apologies if I did. You can always go back through the video and listen to it again. So that's where salvage rights comes into maritime law. An abandoned vessel, meaning no crew, no captain, just floating around, you can capture it, and after a given period of time, if nobody makes a claim on it, you can then claim it for your own, as your own property under salvage rights. So the cargo on board a vessel has reached its destination, and this is where expectant mothers start to come into it, or where they used words, ironically enough, that not only pertain to maritime law but also pertain to expectant mothers. As an example, berth has multiple meanings for a vessel on a body of water. Berth can mean, depending on the context of the statement or the sentence that's being used, berth can mean tied up to a wharf, or it can mean how many sailors the ship can sleep at any one given time. I.e., as an example, if there was 20 sailors and they all went to sleep at the same time but the guy at the steering wheel and the guy at the crow's nest, it could berth 18 sailors. So it could sleep 18 sailors. When it's tied to a wharf, it is also at berth, or it's berthed. So there's a current tense and a past tense. I know that wasn't the right way to say it, but that's how my head's working at the moment. Now the same thing applies to a expectant mother. She can give birth, and the context of the statement would be the mother just gave birth, or the mother has just birthed a child. Okay, so you can see how vessel not only pertains to boats, blood vessels. Birth not only pertains to a vessel, boat, it also pertains to an expectant mother. Now, it may not seem relevant at this point in time, but it will become apparent in part 2. So, the cargo is being transported by vessel to another country. The captain has a manifest, a document of detail of what the cargo is. And the cargo is handed to the port management, if you like, along with the manifest. And where if this pertains to a mother, is that an expectant mother is carrying cargo within her tummy, and not only is she the vessel, but she is also the captain of the vessel, who is required to have a manifest for the cargo she's carrying on board, i.e. you as the cargo. Okay? And so I'll leave it at that for now as part 1, which took somewhere around about 17 minutes by the looks of it. And I will stop this video and then I'll make part 2. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to, every time I start a new video, redo the whole waiver liability acceptance thing. It's just because I refuse to be sued, because, you know, for obvious reasons. Anyway, see you at part 2.